Happy Canada Day! I enjoy reading Canadian authors all year round, but of course I prioritize them during July because of Canada Day. I've got recommendations of books I've read and loved, as well as some books that I plan on reading this July. Not to mention my previous Canadian Reads video, so you do not have to look very far for something new to try if you want to join me in reading Canadian authors this month. Hi, hello, welcome in. I'm Jerica, and I'm a Canadian writer, editor, and all-around content creator. And I want to encourage you to check out some Canadian reads. We have loads of great Canadian authors, but I feel they get pushed to the side a little bit in favor of the more popular, more well-known American authors. Or maybe I simply just don't hear about them as much. So I want to take the opportunity to point you in the direction of some great reads, and then also share some of the Canadian reads that I'm looking forward to. Without further ado, my recommendations. This one might seem familiar because I talked about it last year because I was going to be reading it, but now that I have, I would like to recommend The Troop by Nick Cutter. First, I will read you the cover copy, and then I will tell you my favorite things about it. Once a year, Scoutmaster Tim Riggs leads a troop of boys into the Canadian wilderness for a weekend camping trip. A tradition as comforting and reliable as a good ghost story around a roaring bonfire. But when an unexpected intruder stumbles upon their campsite, shockingly thin, disturbingly pale, and voraciously hungry, Tim and the boys are exposed to something far more frightening than any tale of terror. The human carrier of a bioengineered nightmare, a horror that spreads faster than fear, a harrowing struggle for survival with no escape from the elements, the infected, or one another. Okay, so I feel like it says some stuff on the back, but it kind of keeps it vague, so I don't want to spoil the specifics of this bioengineered nightmare. What I will say is the way that Nick Cutter describes the symptoms of and the like vision of this what was it? Bioengineered nightmare gave me the absolute ick in the best way. I think there was just like a lot of very visceral detail. So if you are a horror fan, if you are a gross me out fan, this is definitely a book for you. But there's more to it than that. I think the other thing that I really enjoyed about it is that it has some similarities to Lord of the Flies, which is a book that I really enjoyed when we read it in high school. Obviously, this is more terrifying than that book is, or maybe I need to reread it. Maybe it was super terrifying. I do think that this one takes it up a notch and adds in a little bit more conflict because not only are the boys and their scout leader on a secluded island, but obviously there is the added fear of this intruder that stumbles into their camp. Yeah, I think that's that. While it's not actually on my TBR for this quarter, I'm going to quickly mention another book that recently released by Nick Cutter that I'm excited to read. It's called The Dorians. I won't get super into it. I will let you find that out on your own. But it sounds really interesting too, and I assume we'll have some of the very same detailed writing as this one. My next recommendation is a little bit older of a novel, and I'm not saying that most of these are current by any means, but the next one I have here is Coming Through Slaughter by Michael Ondaatje. This is one that I maybe read in university, but definitely read last year and enjoyed. I will read you the back copy and then we'll talk about it. This haunting, atmospheric story set in a sensual, erotic world is one of the best-loved of Michael Ondaatje's novels. At the turn of the century, the Storyville district of New Orleans had some 2,000 prostitutes, 70 professional gamblers, and 30 piano players. But it had only one man who played the cornet like Buddy Bolden. He who cut hair by day, and at N. Joseph's shaving parlor, and at night played jazz, unleashing an unforgettable wildness and passion in crowded rooms. Self-destructively in love with two women, he embodied all the dire claims that music places on its acolytes. The age of 31, Buddy Bolden went mad. From these sparse facts, Michael Ondaatje has created a story as beautiful and chilling as a New Orleans funeral procession, where even the mourners dance. So, this is a really interesting novel in that it does pull on some very sparse facts of a possibly real person because there's so little known. There's a lot filled in. This is like almost it wouldn't be autofiction, but like biographiction. Where like it's mostly fictionalized but draws on some real stuff. Even if it wasn't drawn on facts of a real dude, I think it's saying a lot about music culture and music history and how a lot of music is, you know, popularized by a certain group after being created by another, and it is that culture, it is Black Americans that Buddy Bolden is from, and so there's that kind of commentary within the novel, as well as I think there's a really interesting thing being words are hard. Explored in like kind of the idea of like the mad artist or the mentally unwell artist. Absolutely, I think art can be made not on drugs and not with like without mental illness. But there does seem to be something that continues to crop up about um, unwell, down on their luck people who create great art. And like I said, that isn't to say that well people can't, and that isn't to say that those people, if they got well, if they were put into a better position, wouldn't also create even better art maybe, or their art would change, or whatever. There are stories of people who have gotten clean and thought that their music and art had gotten better. So anyways, I just think that there's like a couple really interesting things in here that are like being explored. The third and final recommendation I have for you is one that I recently read, which kind of toes the line between June and July because it is a queer Canadian author. It's also an Indigenous Canadian author. He is Ojibwe. And also something interesting about this is it's not a novel. It's a play. And that is Brefbeuf's Ghost by Daniel David Moses. I'll read the cover copy to you, bleeping out the bad word, and then we'll talk a bit about it. 1649 brings bad news to the Ojibwe communities of Lake Nipissing. The Iroquois are on a warpath, killing traders and Christians at the mission of Sainte Marie. Guess who is going to be next? The shaman is worried about windy guys, the black robe about the fires of hell. Worlds collide in renowned First Nations playwright Daniel David Moses' epic, dark, funny, and finally healing vision of early Canada. So, this is an interesting one to add to my list simply because it is a play. It is the first play that I've read that wasn't part of like assigned reading, and I have some mixed feelings about reading it, but that's not what this video is for. This video is for telling you why I think this story is an interesting one. One of the things that I think I like the most about it is that there are so many different conflicts that kind of run parallel to each other while being almost the same conflict in some ways. And that is the conflicts between the Ojibwe community and the Iroquois community. Then kind of, I mean, it is the Ojibwe community, but overall the kind of native community versus colonizers, particularly Frenchmen and Catholic Frenchmen. And I split those two up because the story does, and that's something that I really like about it, but it's too much of a spoiler to talk about the specifics of it. And then the third one is that addition of folklore, of the hunger, of cannibalism, of the windy guy, which if you know about the folklore, you kind of like understand how that can possibly play into these other conflicts. Um, and if you've never read a play before, whether you read this one or you decide to read another one, something that really helped me enjoy it as I went on, because I wasn't quite sure I was enjoying reading a play, but if you choose to read a play, particularly if you choose to read this one or another Canadian play, try to picture it as a stage play, as live theater, because the second that I started hearing the way that props and footsteps would sound on a stage, I was suddenly far more engaged in it. Um, and so yeah, I highly recommend, even if it's just like one-off reading a play, do it. It's a lot of fun to picture it in a different way. Because I don't know about you, but when I read a novel, I tend to picture it like I would a movie or like I would just real life, depending on kind of the POV. Um, and so reading a play, like that's kind of how I started, and it just wasn't landing right. But picturing it as live theater really helped me kind of like get in there. That I'll maybe tell you when that rant's over. But the story of this is really interesting, and I think it's fun that I can add in such a different book, especially and with like an author who kind of like checks a couple of boxes. Not that we're looking to check boxes, but it is just fun that I happened to pick this up, and then it fell into those things because I didn't know when I picked it up. Anyways, that's it for my recommendations. Let's move on to what I plan on reading, and then there's a sneaky half recommendation at the end. Kind of. Not really. It got complicated. So let's take a look here. I did obviously talk about these books a little bit in my quarter three TBR, but I'm going to talk about them again because uh, this is for people looking for Canadian authors, and that's not what that video is about. So let's start with this one. I'm actually currently reading it. I did start it a little before July. We're not going to talk about it. It is Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Marina Garcia. I will read the flat copy for you, and then we'll talk about it. We'll talk about why I'm so excited about it, how I picked it out. Okay. He is trying to poison me. You must come for me, Noemi. You have to save me. After receiving a frantic letter from her newlywed cousin, Noemi Tabuada. Nope. Noemi Tabuada heads to High Place, a distant house in the Mexican countryside, unsure what she will find. Noemi is an unlikely rescuer. She's a glamorous debutante, more suited to cocktail parties than amateur sleuthing. But she's also tough, smart, and not afraid. Not of her cousin's new English husband, a stranger who is both menacing and alluring. Not of his father, the ancient patriarch, who seems fascinated by Noemi. And not even of the house itself, which begins to invade Noemi's dreams with visions of blood and doom. Noemi's only ally in this inhospitable place is the family's youngest son. But he too may be hiding something dark, for there are many secrets behind the walls of High Place, as Noemi discovers when she begins to unearth stories of violence and madness. Mesmerized by this terrifying yet seductive world, Noemi may soon find it impossible to save her cousin, or even escape this enigmatic house. So, this is a book that I became interested in during a course in college that was focused on kind of like Canadian literature through the years, and this was one of the more modern ones. I think we were probably comparing it to like something from the past that had like similar genre vibes. But I am a lover of all things dark and, haunted and the like dark gothic atmosphere. Now, it doesn't sound particularly Canadian because it is taking place in Mexico, but the author is Canadian. She lives in Vancouver. Uh, and something that kind of added some extra excitement to this for me was I actually saw Sylvia Marina Garcia in a panel just last month, I think, on horror writing. And so I had just found this at the local bookstore, used, and then that panel came across my I don't know, attention, and so I went to that, and so the excitement for this one has really been building for me. Now, I am about halfway through it, so I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want to accidentally start giving things away. Yeah, I think I've said what I need to say about it. Uh, I think if you are into um like haunted pasts, not necessarily like actual ghosts, but like the idea of like pasts coming back to haunt you uh in a sinister way, in a it could be supernatural way, but maybe it's just bad luck kind of way. The idea of like places or families just like having bad luck or having a curse or like whatever. Also, if you like things that draw on like folklore, there's definitely a little bit of that going on in here. Um, yeah, it's because I'm halfway through. I'm like, it's already good. So this is like almost a half recommendation. But this is a book that I'm currently reading. Let's get into the ones that I haven't started yet. So the next one is Under the Ribs of Death by John Marlyn. Marlyn? I'm not sure. This one is an interesting one. Let me read you the back copy and then I will give you the rundown of why I'm excited to read this. Uh, the haunting, perceptive story of a Hungarian boy lost between the customs of his parents and those of the Canada to which he passionately desires to belong is both a moving appeal for tolerance and a vivid recreation of the dreams which live in the heart of an imaginative child as he grows to manhood. And so I'm kind of interested in this one because I do think that Canada has some uniqueness in the way that immigrants live here. And like this is maybe just like my perspective, but I've had this conversation with other people where, um, a lot of people call the United States like a melting pot. And what that means is like everybody who like assimilates to America, like does assimilate to America, they pick up on now they might be picking up on like subcultures, of course, but they are like very much like American whatever. Whereas I kind of view Canada as being more of like a mosaic or a quilt. And it's not that people don't pick up on like Canadian culture. I just think that Canadian culture is like there's like more separation. People tend to like keep customs from wherever they've come from down through generations. Like you can still find like there's like a town that I drive through regularly. Not regularly, but it's on the way to like places that like particularly I go camping, and I drive through this place, and it's like the first Polish town, and it's still like a Polish town. Um, and so it's just I think Canada is like a little bit different, and I do think that we tend to see more of like not a melting of cultures, but like just like a piling on almost. Where like sure like people add in Canadian things and maybe they drop some things from wherever, but they tend to keep some of their things. If that makes any sense, it's just it feels less melty and more like yes um and so I'm interested to see from this like very unique perspective. It's from not only like an immigrant but a child immigrant, and that idea of being I guess that's considered first, you have to be like born here. I don't, first generation, I think is how that works. I get confused by that sometimes. Because I forget like if like first generation is like firstborn generation or like first generation like lived here kind of thing. Anyways, because there's so much extra going on. Not only are you trying to figure out how to not stand out like a sore thumb in Canada by being Hungarian, but also you're tackling all of that coming of age stuff that everybody at that age is tackling. And so you have this kind of like added level of figuring out everything that's changing for you. I just think that's going to be like a really interesting read. And then my third, though not only from my TBR for this month, is Hitman, The Untold Story of Canada's Deadliest Assassin by Julian Sher and Lisa Fitterman. This was kind of like a surprise find. For those of you who don't know, I always have this year I've started always having at least one nonfiction to read on my TBR for every quarter. And I wasn't actually looking for a Canadian one because I was like, I don't know how I'm going to find that, because I was looking for it at a used bookstore. Obviously, if I could, like, I would just, like, research and order something, but this was a surprise find for me. I was just looking for a nonfiction that I thought would be interesting, and I was looking at the shelf, and I saw a Canadian one. I'm super excited about this one. Oh, I didn't read you the cover, or the flap copy. We'll come back to those thoughts. For Yves Trudeau, the blood was all business. An assassin for the Hells Angels in the 70s and 80s, Trudeau did his job so well that the bikers sometimes lent him out to other organized crime empires in Montreal, including the East End French gangs and the upstart Irish Mafia in the West End. Yves Trudeau remains one of Canada's most prolific serial killers. When he narrowly missed being assassinated because he was in drug rehab, he turned government informant and confessed to his crimes, which included killing 43 people. But as a witness, Trudeau was a disaster, and the sweetheart deal he got with little jail time for his murders caused outrage. Award-winning writers Julian Sher and Lisa Fitterman tell the incredible story of how this assassin escaped the police and the justice system for more than a decade. A compelling and revealing account of corruption, incompetence, and murder, Hitman is based on extensive research and exclusive new interviews with police, lawyers, and criminals who knew Yves Apache Trudeau and his dark underworld. Okay, so super interested and excited for this one because, kind of like I was saying about horror a little while ago, true crime is something that I'm really like interested in. Like, I'll watch true crime documentaries, and like I've started listening to a podcast. I watch YouTube on true crime. And interestingly enough, my mom reads so much true crime, and somehow I have not picked up a true crime book until now. So this is another one of those, like, how have I not read this genres? Wait, did that make sense? Not really. This is another one of those genres where it's like, how have I not read it yet? So that in and of itself is very exciting. But the fact that I found a Canadian true crime, and also that it's like our most prolific serial killer, although I have thoughts about whether a hitman should be considered a serial killer, but I am not a police guy, so I don't really get to define those things. I just feel like they're different. But, like, in theory, they're not really. Anyways, maybe I'll have more thoughts about that after we've read it, too. After I've read it. What else do I have to say about this? I think that's it. I think that's the excitement about it. I think I think I'm also particularly interested in it because it is about the Hells Angels, and that's kind of like a big, well-known organized crime. I almost said syndicate. It's probably not the wrong word, but organized crime group that is still going on today for sure. And so I just like I think that's interesting. I feel like I don't know a whole lot about Canada's organized crime. I feel like uh, I've watched a lot of shows and movies and things that have organized crime, but um, they're almost always in like New York. Interestingly enough, which I guess is not that far from us. But uh, I don't know a whole lot about what goes on here. Like, yeah, I don't know. I think that this is a really interesting one. I don't know if it's really saying a whole lot about Canadian culture or anything like that. But uh, it's not saying anything about Canadian culture. And then, like I said, that sneaky, not really recommendation. This was going to be a recommendation, but unfortunately, this book is out of print. And I just recently found out, but it's By the Fire Shattered Reflections with me as one of the authors. It was a project that we did through my college program. But there have been some changes in the way draft to digital works, which requires some financial output from people who are not bringing in enough money. And so the person who was running this has obviously taken it down. Um, so if you can somehow get your hands on a copy of this, I still highly recommend it, and I think it would be really cool if you read it and told me about it. But there are stories in this that I haven't read yet, so it is on my TBR. There is a wide range of stories and genres and things in here. It's really just a matter of all the students who wanted to be a part of it chose a story and threw it in. Um, and then we all worked on like editing it and stuff. So I was going to recommend you get a copy of this and join me in finishing off the stories from it that I haven't read. But obviously that's probably not going to happen. But I still wanted to shout out my graduating class um, and say that we did make something cool. It is a bunch of Canadian authors. Although, I mean, technically not all of them are Canadian authors, but they went to school in Canada. We definitely had some international students in our program as well. But yeah, I want to catch up because I've edited some of them and I had read some of them prior to being put into this, but there are definitely some that I haven't read yet. And so I'd like to read the rest. That is the end of this year's Canadian Reads video. Uh, if you're dying for more, maybe you've read a bunch of these and you're looking for more recommendations, I did do a similar video last year that you can go check out. Whether you're reading Canadian authors this month or not, let me know what July's TBR holds for you. If you happen to have Canadian author recommendations or Canadian book recommendations, please drop them down in the comments for me and for everybody else looking for Canadian reads. And that includes you if you happen to be a Canadian that has books out. Please feel free to self-promote yourself. I think that's everything, so I hope you had fun, found a book to read, I had a blast, and catch you next time. Bye! Oh, and in case you haven't noticed them, I just wanted to point out my moose socks. That's right, I wore red, and I wore orange, and I wore moose socks. Oh my gosh, why can't I read?